Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. And have I got a batch of stories for you? Violence in America. Unless you're living under a rock, you know that this is a violent time in America. In previous Saving America episodes, I've discussed the horrible attacks on churches and other institutions. We are aware of the violence committed with apparent impunity by Americans and illegals, resulting in death of the victims and spreading fear in our communities. In my lifetime, I do not remember hardly ever hearing about a parent killing a child, and yet there have been even several reports of this horrible thing happening. Against this sad backdrop, we have violence in major American cities. The alleged trigger is the fact that the America that we know was overrun by the Biden-Harris administration's open borders policy. While many were only seeking a better life, a large number were criminals and asylum inmates from other countries. The American people voted to both end the practice of open borders and to bring safety to our streets. Part of that program is locating, imprisoning, and deporting those who have committed serious crimes in our communities. The stories are known to all who pay attention to the news. The agency that is charged with this is ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Despite the public support for this agency, terrorists and high-profile Dems have used the word ICE to trigger not just protests, but violent protests. We all know that this violence is happening in places like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, Oregon. The protests take place near ICE facilities, and there are also efforts to block ICE activities in areas where illegal criminal aliens hang out. As these are federal employees and federal offices, the U.S. government has every right to provide protection for them. It is bizarre that the local authorities, who are obviously not doing their job to maintain law and order and to protect these workers and facilities, are refusing to support them. Look, if they did not want the feds, they could simply provide the necessary security themselves. And if they cannot provide that security, why not take the aid being provided by the feds? There are several problems here. First, you have Democrat public officials coming out in favor of criminal illegals and imposing ICE enforcement. That makes no sense to me. Second, America's cities are facing significant declines due to chronic lack of enforcement and punishment for serious criminal acts. I believe the pendulum is swinging back, and I expect that despite the funding from the Soros machine, more conservative district attorneys and overall police support is going to come back to American cities. Third, I strongly support President Trump's declaration that ANTIFA is a terrorist organization. Many of the reports about the violence around ICE locations in LA, Portland, and Chicago indicate that similar perpetrators are involved in this mob violence. Do we know that the sponsor is ANTIFA? Not specifically. Unlike in the Middle East, where the terrorists celebrate the mayhem they cause, the locals here do not specifically claim to be part of ANTIFA. However, we all know if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it probably is a duck, meaning Antifa. I know many of the members of my audience appreciate my connection to current and prior history. In this case, just over 100 years ago, the Bolshevik Revolution destroyed the Russian government and replaced it with a violent scourge that has haunted much of Europe, especially following the end of World War II. Just under 100 years ago, Hitler got his start in Germany with many of the same false claims against a minority group and against the German government. The actions of Antifa and its associates are following the same pattern. While violence appears to only target certain federal workers and facilities, if they are successful, more and more mayhem will follow, involving more and more regular Americans. Now, I work 7 days a week. Many of the people that I know are working like crazy to support their families. How can such a large number of people in distant cities afford to spend their time doing violence? What about their food bills, their rent, their families? They do not seem to care about being arrested. In my opinion, most Americans never want to be arrested. Most of us do not even want a traffic ticket. Here's my point. This is too organized and too consistent across multiple sites to be merely local protests by random factions. I am hearing more reports, some of it brought out by Trump's declaration that Antifa is a terrorist organization. There is some type of organization and structure to what is happening here. While coincidences are possible, this is obviously not a coincidence. So if there are new actors today in the place of Hitler, Lenin, and Trotsky from the early 20th century, who are they? I have heard one name consistently, and that is George Soros and organizations that he funds. I do not know if this is true. Frankly, I hear this man is very wealthy. Why would he want to see a revolution in America? This country, unlike Tsarist Russia and post-World War I Germany, is generally successful and could be even more successful with reforms of its failed bureaucracy. I know there are investigations pending in the current administration of Soros and his organizations. I am watching for those results. Peace in the Middle East. We have passed the second anniversary of the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Reports are that the Trump-sponsored end of the suffering for the remaining Hamas hostages and the return of the deceased to their families has been endorsed by both sides. Hostages are to return to Israel dead or alive. Once that happens, as many as 250 prisoners held by Israel will be released. Israel is also then supposed to withdraw from the internal Gaza areas. Still in negotiation is extracting Hamas from Gaza, but as I've said before, given the infiltration of the population in Gaza, is it really possible to remove all the Hamas terrorists? What about their civilian supporters? My own take is that Israel needs to do what they did after the Olympic terrorist attacks in Berlin 50 years ago. They must hunt down and eliminate anyone from Hamas and any who helped them. The Israelis prove that they can be consistent and effective. That is what is needed here. Otherwise, I do believe anyone tied to Hamas will continue to threaten Israelis and Americans in particular. Feds on top of university DEI scams. We've been hearing about the Fed crackdown on Ivy League schools like Harvard, Columbia, and Penn. Well, public universities are not exempt. I'm a big fan of the University of Virginia, where I earned 2 graduate degrees. However, I did hear that UVA was out on the DEI ladder. In fact, they were paying some ridiculous amount, like $400,000 a year, to a DEI head. As I am remote to the university, I was not aware of what was happening. However, a while back, an alumni group connected with me with the mission to return UVA to a place that Thomas Jefferson would be proud of. The two-side approach of the feds coming at UVA from one side and concerned alumni from the other side seems to have worked. The UVA president resigned abruptly recently, about a year before his planned retirement. 2 government investigations of UVA have been declared resolved. I see progress here. All is not rosy. A state of Virginia university near D.C., George Mason University, is in the Fed's crosshairs for Title IX and civil rights violations. Last I heard, the president credited with much of this nonsense is still there. That might not be permanent on his part. Speaking of Virginia, chaos in the Dem plan to retake Virginia. I track politics in Virginia since it's my adopted home state and it's up close to D.C. Because of its proximity to Washington and largely Dem operation there, VA has a history of electing many Dem politicians. Well, they had a surprise in 2021 when Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, was elected, along with his Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Sears. She is now running for Virginia governor against far-left Spanberger. Some dirt has come out in the lieutenant governor race, but the big dirt is the Dem candidate for Attorney General, Jay Jones. Just as the early voting started in Virginia, texts that Jones sent to another legislator have come out. In 2022, he wrote about 2 bullets to the head of a GOP representative. His full statement included reference to the children of that representative dying in their mother's arms. This is the talk of terrorists. The latest is that Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, a well-documented lightweight, has spoken out for Jones staying in the race. I hope not only that Jones will lose, but that Kaine will soon be replaced in the Senate. The latest polling has Spanberger ahead of Winsome Earl Sears by 8 points. I hope the Jones controversy and the usual approach of more conservative voters not participating in the polls may mean a different outcome. In addition, in the lieutenant governor's race in Virginia, there's an interesting article by Virginia Grace McKinnon in the Daily Signal discussing a movement by a coalition of traditional Democrats to support GOP candidate John Reed. The coalition's model is, this isn't about party, it's about Virginia's future. This could mark a positive trend. I do not support blindly supporting the candidates of either political party. I have also been encouraging more Americans to vote in primary elections where the candidates in the general election are decided. Government agencies censoring Americans. An interesting article in the Washington Free Beacon by Aaron Schuberheim discussed the Department of Homeland Security Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, with a focus on censorship during the 2020 elections and tied to concerns about COVID. An example in the article describes a tweet in what was then called Twitter that was taken down when CISA contacted Twitter to complain that it was misinformation. The source of the example was credited to the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. That's current day. Of course, Americans later learned that the lefties in government labeled anything they disagreed with as misinformation. The article presents a balanced approach explaining the extensive free speech violations by CISA, but also expressing concerns more recently that the FCC's chair comments regarding Jimmy Kimmel's inappropriate comments around Charlie Kirk's assassination might lay the groundwork for even more government censorship. As someone who's been censored from time to time, I agree with the free speech concepts. It should be rare when the government intervenes. Examples might include threats of criminal activity, terrorism, and matters of similar concern like the 9/11 plot. There's so much on the political front that's hard to squeeze in some business news. Starbucks has announced major cuts. Starbucks has become a fixture of American culture. Their locations seem to be everywhere and even in other countries. Many people comment on the high cost of a cup of coffee or food items at their locations. With Americans watching their budgets, I'm not surprised that Starbucks is reviewing its entire operation. Reports are that CEO Brian Niccol is going to cut costs by $1 billion. Involved are 900 headquarters jobs and closing locations that are not profitable. The closings have hit close to home as 2 Starbucks near our studios here in Houston, Texas are listed as closing or have already closed. In fact, a friend of the family is working at a location in California, which has now closed. Of course, a sub-story for Starbucks is their success has attracted unionization, and the union organized as many as 12,000 of the Starbucks workers is complaining about those cutbacks. This week, I want to call my audience's attention to an interesting article that ran in late August in the NTD newsletter titled, "Common Tea Sweetener Shows Potential as Natural Cancer Treatment." The author, Rudy Blaylock, did a nice job of summarizing this interesting research. The title caught my attention since I've been using stevia to reduce my use of sugar. The subtitle of the article is, "The Findings Could Lead to Affordable Natural Cancer Treatments for a Disease That Kills Many Patients Within 5 Years." I assume that most of my audience know that stevia is a plant and the leaves have sort of a sweet taste. Over the last 5 years or so, many have begun to use this sweetener made from the leaves instead of sugar or other artificial sweeteners. Full disclosure, since I use it, does not taste exactly like sugar. The research comes from Japan's Hiroshima University. Just so you know, using stevia like I do to sweeten iced tea is not going to protect you from cancer. The stevia study was combined with a certain bacteria to create the medication. The target is pancreatic cancer. This cancer is often a silent killer since it's in the center of the torso of the human body, usually not detected until it's too late to save the patient. A source cited in the article explained that most pancreatic cancer patients die within 5 years. The survival rate is less than 10%. The article indicates that the experimental medication attacks the cancer cells, but not the nearby healthy cells. I refer our listeners to the NTD article for much more detail.
All rise.
Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Garrett Biss, who is a retired Marine Corps pilot, addiction recovery coach, and TEDx speaker. After retirement in 2015, Garrett confronted challenges common among veterans: anxiety, depression, and a sense of displacement. Turning alcohol as a crutch, it wasn't until suicidal ideation took hold that he sought change. Rather than traditional addiction treatments, Garrett's path was shaped by mentoring that emphasized self-worth, rediscovery, and his identity, and tapping into inherent strengths. This approach not only alleviated his addictive behaviors, but also reignited his passion for life. Garrett's transformative experience sparked his commitment to assisting others with recovery tools, grounded in positivity and personal strength. He often remarks that while numerous resources aid individuals in emerging from their darkest moments, he aspires to propel them even further toward their highest potential. In 2017, he co-founded an addiction recovery residence in North Carolina, serving as an interim program director, executive director, and former board president. Additionally, Garrett crafted a recovery program and curriculum deeply rooted in positive psychology and principles of human flourishing. Developed by Garrett, Valiant Path is tailored specifically for veterans, blending group coaching, one-on-one emotional processing, and evidence-based recovery methods. A graduate of the Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland and holding a master's from the Haber's Business School at Auburn University, Garrett's spirit of service soars beyond recovery. He is a pilot for the Civil Air Patrol and helms a global water nonprofit, 1 Million Goal Incorporated. Hey, we had to shorten this bio so we'd have time for the interview. And here we have Garrett Biss for his first interview on Saving America.
David, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and I appreciate the work that you're doing and spreading messages and some inspiration and ideas out to America.
Doing our best here. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. American vets are experiencing trauma related to their military service. This is leading to the problems that you're addressing. What are the underlying causes for these problems? Why are we confronting these problems?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things I noticed and really kind of inspired some of the work or presentations I do, I noticed that there was a little bit of a misconception in the mental health field, especially, and probably in the general population, that if a veteran is struggling with some kind of mental health challenges or substance challenges after service, that it must be tied back to some kind of trauma that they experienced in the service, whether on the battlefield or military sexual trauma, or maybe a training mishap or something that they experienced that was a catalyst for the suffering or the way that they struggle to re-engage in life after military service. So as a population, veterans are more than 200% more likely to struggle with mental health challenges or suffer with addiction. 1 in 5 post 9/11 or GWAT veterans is expected to experience or be diagnosed with PTSD. And sadly, many more than 20% will experience some pretty severe symptoms of PTS. So what I have found is that regardless of what a veteran experiences while they're in the military, that transition from military service itself can be traumatic. And the reason I say this is because the way, we as humans, we have some fundamental human needs for our basic mental and emotional well-being. This is something all humans have, but when we look at our needs we're biological creatures, so of course we have needs for food, water, and shelter, but we also have needs for connection. We're tribal creatures. We do our best when we have a sense of belonging, when we're part of a group, and it's actually even hardwired into us. Our ability to emotionally regulate, our ability to get through difficult and challenging times, our ability to perform the best all comes back to and relies on this need, this fundamental need that we have for connection. We also, with that need for connection, have a need for authenticity. We need to be able to show up as we are, to express our wants, to ask for our needs to be met, and not fear that if we show up authentically, it will jeopardize our connection. So connection, authenticity, and the third fundamental need that we have is the need for meaning. So I used to understand meaning as something that maybe provided a little joy, a little context in your life. But after studying the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl, and he's most famous for his book Man's Search for Meaning, I came to understand that a sense of meaning in our life is much more profound. It's actually what provides our capacity to endure suffering, to endure some of the hard and challenging times that we face. So when you look at a veteran or you look at a military service member, the way that they've come to meet these fundamental needs for connection, for authenticity, and for meaning is taken away from them. So this foundation that they've built and the way that they've met this foundation for these basic needs for mental and emotional well-being is lost when they take off the uniform for the last time. And this is something I think is missed and isn't properly addressed. It's not just the challenges of things, sadly, there are a lot of veterans that struggle because of things that they witnessed on the battlefield or things that they witnessed while deployed. But many more veterans are struggling because of this loss of identity, because of the loss of the way that they can meet their fundamental needs, for emotional regulation, their capacity to endure challenging times. And this is something that I think really kind of flies under the radar. But this is a major reason that I believe that regardless of what a veteran experiences in the military, that transition from military service itself can be traumatic. And this is what leads, unfortunately and sadly, to a lot of the challenges that we're seeing.
Gerald, that's a fascinating response to this challenging situation we face in our society. Addiction plagues a great deal of Americans. How does our working with vets differ from working with the general audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if you ask somebody what causes addiction or what leads somebody down the path towards a struggle with a substance or a behavior, if you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers. There's libraries that are filled about this topic. One of the things that I understand and see that is profoundly different between the general population of individuals that might struggle and the veteran population is that if you're working with somebody who's never had a foundation for mental and emotional well-being, sadly, there's a lot of individuals, not just in this country, but around the world that grew up in situations or lived through circumstances that really prevented them from ever really fully establishing a positive identity, a sense of confidence, and that foundation for mental and emotional well-being. If you're working with a population such as that, it's profoundly different than working with a population of individuals like veterans who often had a very strong foundation for their mental and emotional well-being. So if you're taking systems and programs and resources that are designed for a population that has really never experienced that strong foundation for their mental and emotional well-being, that resilience against substances and behaviors, and you're trying to map that onto or provide that to a population of individuals that really their struggle is not that they never had a strong foundation, that they never had the resilience, against some problematic behaviors, but that they once had it and they lost it. They've been through a major transition and they lost that strong foundation that they had. So that's the profound difference, really the fundamental difference that I see between working with veterans. Really, my job with veterans is not to help them see themselves in a way they never saw themselves, but to help them see themselves and remind them of who they once knew themselves to be.
Well, that is a fascinating situation, a great contrast between the so-called civilian population and the military and post-military population. We want to spend some time talking about your breakthroughs in treatment for vets. Explain some of the key steps you've developed, including how Valiant Path can help. How does that work?
Yeah, so great question. So first, I'll make mention of a term that you use, treatment. So I work non-clinically in the mental health field. So I understand clinical care is more pathology focused. So identifying what's wrong with somebody and then help mitigating the negative effects of any symptoms or defects or diagnoses that might show up. In the non-clinical mental health world, so really if you're thinking peer supports, coaches, or really the field of positive psychology, the focus is not on what's wrong with somebody, but what's right with somebody. What are the innate or the latent strengths that they have? What's the value that they have? And my work with veterans is really about reminding them of these things, reconnecting them with the worth and the value that they have, reconnecting them first and foremost with themselves. A lot of times when we go through a major transition or something is traumatic in our life, we get disconnected from who we are. So a first step or a primary step is reconnecting the individual with who they are. And then if you look even within the body, after you've been through a traumatic experience or you're in a constant state of flight or flight or increased anxiety, this can actually disconnect parts of us, inside of us in a way, whether really put our sympathetic or our parasympathetic nervous systems out of balance. So really, fundamentally, the place to start is by providing veterans tools to first reconnect and regain coherence within their body. This can help alleviate some of the anxiety, some of that fight or flight sense that you're constantly in, so that then they can continue that journey and continue to do the work. And then it becomes connecting with the value and the worth that they have. We're hardwired as individuals for, and really all biological creatures are hardwired for self-preservation or preservation first.
Absolutely.
The sad effect of this is that, is that we tend to focus more on the negative. So that's not just negative around us, but more of the negative inside of us too. And this comes back to that self-preservation. If I were to make some mistakes last week, or there are things I didn't like about myself, or there's weaknesses that I've identified, or things that I'm not great at, this tends to consume more of our cognition or more of our mind than the wins and successes that we've had along the way. Because if we were to repeat those failures, if we were to make those same mistakes again, then this could jeopardize our preservation. So it makes sense why we do that. Unfortunately, the sad consequence of that is if I think of my mind as a browser and I have all these tabs open on my browser, all of these thoughts and memories open in my mind, if they're predominantly negative thoughts or negative reminders of things that I've done in the past or mistakes or times I've let people down, that doesn't do very well for our self-esteem and our sense of confidence. So there's a tremendous opportunity to help remind individuals of the wins and successes and the strengths that they've had, so they begin to see themselves in a different light. They begin to value themselves a little bit differently. And this is what really creates that first step or that foundation to then go on and re-engage in things that are meaningful to you. Find a sense of purpose and passion in your life and get reconnected with that. And that's really a replication of the journey that I went on. As you mentioned, I didn't go through more of a traditional treatment model, but I was fortunate to be connected with a coach and with a mentor who helped me do that work of reconnecting me with the strength and the worth that I had as an individual, reminding me or encouraging me to remind myself of wins and successes that I had along the way. And this started to shift my perception of myself, help me see myself as somebody who was deserving of joy and happiness and success in my life. And then by reconnecting with the strengths, it reminded me of the tools that I have, the innate strengths that I have within me that I can apply to engaging in the things that are meaningful in my life. So really through that journey, it was a reconnection with myself, a reconnection with the strength that I had, and then a reconnection with things that were meaningful or that could provide that sense of meaning in my life. And that's really the journey that I help recreate for individuals through both the Valiant Path and through another curriculum that I've recently designed for the veteran population or high-risk veteran populations.
Well, it's a fascinating situation, and I hope the word gets out more because I don't know how many thousands and thousands of vets we've had through the military. We don't have the same numbers, of course, that we had in previous generations,
Right.
but we're still experiencing every one of them is a valuable person, and doing our best to help them return to the path sounds like a good approach. How can our listeners get good information about you and your various projects?
Yeah, so great question. So I'm most present on LinkedIn, so that's a great way to connect. And then, of course, you can go to my website, which is garrettbiss.com. I'll provide you that link if you want to put it in the show notes. We can send that out. But it's GARRETBISS, and I'll speak to my veteran audience. It's Golf Alpha Romeo Romeo Echo Tango Bravo India Sierra Sierra.com.
Please proceed.
Idiot Dems supported by slopstream media claim that Trump is killing Social Security. Contrary to the loud claims, Trump is not trashing Social Security. The Social Security Administration put in a security measure that requires active account holders to change their bank deposit information only online. The SSA also said that this is the only phone service cut and all other services by phone will continue. Some local offices will also be closed to save money. Remember that both parties have looted the Social Security Trust Fund and that some type of cuts are required to get past the 2030 projected crash in this program. Trump and his administration have repeatedly assured the public that there will be no cuts to actual payments of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Sustained.
The families of the October 7th victims in Israel sued Al Jazeera Network and its American affiliate Al Jazeera International for providing support to Hamas. The suit was filed in Washington, D.C., where Al Jazeera has an office. From my view, I have never understood why this clearly biased operation, reportedly funded out of Qatar, was ever considered a news source in the U.S. Even some Middle Eastern countries know that it is trouble. The suit names reporters who are believed to have been inside Hamas planning and therefore were able to provide reports of the horrors from that day very soon after the attack started. The hope is that a win in this case could cripple the U.S. operation, since despite concerns, it is still considered a news organization and not a foreign agent.
Motion denied.
Our series interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure you'll agree that he deserves the moniker of an interesting person. Saving America welcomes George Fernandez. He is a visionary leader and entrepreneur with over 20 years of executive experience in both private and publicly traded companies. He specializes in electronic payments, ATMs, cryptocurrency, and precious metals.
Thank you.
Throughout his career, George has driven the creation and implementation of strategic and has established several companies as market leaders. He's played a pivotal role in decision-making, actively participating in design, market strategy development, and launch of innovative products, including the world's first ATM to dispense gold-backed notes. He has a proven track record of not just launching and scaling successful ventures such as PowerCoin and Level 4 Americas, but also in cultivating a collaborative and innovative company culture. Under his leadership, PowerCoin rose to become one of the most profitable crypto ATM deployers globally. During his time at Level 4 Americas, he guided the company to its position as the largest retail ATM deployer in Mexico and a prominent player in ATM software testing in the U.S. He steered Paramount to become one of the largest ATM operators in the U.S., led Heller Capital through strategic acquisitions and boosting their market power. George has served on the board of the ATM Industry Association, established the Crypto Deployers Forum. He is a recipient of numerous industry awards, the Lifetime Achievement Award from ATMIA, and also listed in the Marquis Who's Who directory, holds an MBA in International Business from UMiami, Herbert School of Business, and a BS in Marketing and Computer Science from Seton Hall University. He is fluent in English and Spanish. Presently Chief Strategy Officer of Magnus Consulting, operating from both Florida and Puerto Rico. We had to shorten his bio so he would have time for the interview itself. We welcome George Fernandez for his first appearance on Saving America.
Wonderful. Thank you, David, for that introduction. Are you sure that that's me that you're reading all the stuff about?
Well, I sure hope so. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble for false advertising here or something like that. So,
I appreciate the invitation of being here.
You bet. Well, we're delighted to have you. And you are speaking to us today from your base in Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, your first time interview from the island, and we're delighted to have you. As you know, we ask 3 general questions of our guests. In our years interviewing guests on Saving America, you're our first guest to speak about Puerto Rico. You have shared with me that the island is faced with challenges, but many are the result of problems of administration. Please explain more about that to our audiences.
Sure. So one qualifier before I give my opinions, and that is I am not Puerto Rican. I wasn't born here. I wasn't raised here. I've been traveling to this island for the last 30 years on business. I've been married to a wonderful Puerto Rican lady for the last 12 years, and I've lived here for the last 5. So that's kind of my connection to the island. I have gotten pretty involved in the local, politics, not being a politician, but just being aware of what's going on in the island. And I find that, traveling the world sometimes is better to have an opinion about something when you're not emotionally connected to that subject, right? So as I've traveled here and as I lived here, and again having a Puerto Rican in my house, I hear a lot of the things that are historical, which have led to some of the problems. And again, having my background, and I'm originally Cuban, but I lived in Spain and the United States and lived abroad, done business all over the world. I'm able to look at the situation here with a completely different set of eyes from perhaps the locals who look at it mostly from a passionate perspective and point of view. So that as a background to make sure that people understand that I'm saying this not as a Puerto Rican, but as an unattached person in this situation. So on to your question. Yeah, I mean, this is an island that it's 100 miles across and 35 miles up and down. On its best day, has about 3 million people that reside here. So you look at it and you say, it should not be a difficult place to manage and govern. Yet it is, right? And I am a amazing patriotic American, but I think a lot of the issues in this island are caused by the United States, because this is a place that historically, it's never been independent. It was first a Spanish colony for many, many years. And then, over the last 100 years or so, it's been an American colony, right? And even as an American colony, it's gone through a couple of different gyrations of that over the last, since the early 50s or so. It's a commonwealth of the United States, and Puerto Ricans are American citizens. But because it's not a state and it's not an independent country, it's kind of in this hybrid middle. And that creates a lot of the confusion of the local population here about who they are. Are they Puerto Ricans? Are they U.S. citizens? And the population is kind of divided, right? A lot of them, Puerto Ricans are very proud of the island. They're very proud of their heritage. And so you ask any Puerto Rican in the streets, they will tell you that they're first, they're Boricuas, and Boricua is even more than Puerto Rican. Is more like a deep sense of patriotism to the island. But at the same time, they have a passport that doesn't say they're Puerto Rican citizens, right? They have a passport that says they're American citizens, and they get most of the funding for anything in this island comes from the United States. But the problem is the United States just sends money over, right, without any accountability. And there is where I think the problem lies, right? This island receives billions and billions and billions of dollars every year in aid from the United States, whether it's for social programs or just direct cash, right? But very little accountability. And human beings are very easy to corrupt. So when you have that amount of money in the hands of people that are not being sort of held to any kind of responsibility what they do with the money, it only helps to create this corruption, right, that is going on here. And a lot of the issues in this island are because most of the administrations, and regardless of what party is in power, they use that money and in a corrupt way. Again, these are all my opinions, but if you look at the amount of money that gets sent to the island, and then you look at the infrastructure here, things don't make any sense. Like the roads here are in very poor shape. The electric system in this island is held together by barbed wire and duct tape, right? The Hurricane Maria in 2017 kind of showed the poor state of the system, and it hasn't been repaired. It was kind of patched up, and we get electricity, but 99% of the homes in the island have a generator, right? Because we don't trust the power grid, we don't trust the generation. So you look at this island. This is an island which has one governor and literally 100 senators and representatives, right? And each one of those has a staff of people. There's 78 municipalities, each one with a mayor and staff, right? In an island 100 by 35 with 3 million people, it's not possible to cover something like this, right? There was a study done that for every dollar that this island receives in aid, 46 cents of that goes to govern, right? It doesn't have to be that way. So I think, if you were to streamline the government in this place, you will probably have a much more efficient government. And if the United States were to put accountability for every dollar that they send to the island, I think we would eliminate some of this corruption that we have here. So government here is not people that run for governor, not just government, but any local, any public service office. It's kind of a job, right? Let's go be in power so that we can take advantage of these wonderful benefits that the United States mainland, as they call, the country here, sends us every year. And so I have personal experience where people have, said, hey, our party's in power right now, let's go, eat at the buffet. Literally, that's how it was sold to me. And
Wow.
qualifier, I'm not a politician, will never pretend to be a politician. I don't like it. I steer clear of it, but it is a hobby of mine to see how the politicians work. And in my job, I've had to not just go appear before the U.S. Senate for some things that were being proposed that were going to damage our industry, but I've also appeared before the Mexican Senate for something similar. And I've spent a great deal of time between 2012 and 2014 walking the hallways of the Senate here because they were going to do something similar. So I'm very familiar with how politics works, which is why I stay clear of it. But
well, it is pretty interesting. And I think where you've been going ties in nicely with our second question, which is, what is the viewpoint of Puerto Ricans about becoming the 51st state of the United States, which has been bopped around mostly as a political weapon because the Democrat Party believes that the island would be primarily a Democrat stronghold. I don't know if that's even true, but what are you seeing there on the ground?
Yeah, so because Puerto Rico is not a U.S. State, right? There's primarily two parties here, which have nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats. The population here is divided amongst people that want statehood, right? They want Puerto Rico to be a state, and that is called the PNP party, the Partido Nuevo Progresista. And then there's the Popular Party. The Popular Party wants Puerto Rico to remain its current status quo. Okay, and then there has been an independent party that up until this year has been on the fringes, right? People that want Puerto Rico to be an independent nation, and that used to be polling around 1% of the population. Interesting this year, that party created an alliance with another party in the island, and all the polls say that they are going to be second, which is historical in the island, right? Beating the PPD, which is the Popular Party, which wants this place to be a status quo. So if they get that kind of support, it's going to be interesting how the politics in the island are going to change. Most of the polls show that Jennifer Gonzalez is going to be the new governor, and she belongs to the PNP party, which is the pro-statehood. But at the end of the day, all of this stuff is a lot of it is politics, to your point, right? In order for Puerto Rico to be a state, you have to have a supermajority of people voting for it. That has never happened. The best time that they've had in that is a 52% plebiscite that they did in 2012 around there, which it got 52%, but then the other party cried foul because of the way they worded the question. So the island is kind of divided between half that want it to be a state and the other half that don't want it to be a state. And the people that don't want it to be a state is mostly because of cultural reasons, right? People are, I said at the beginning, Puerto Ricans are very proud of their culture. They feel like they are Boricuas rather than American citizens. They use the passport when it's convenient, but that's when it's convenient, when they travel and to get the aid and all of that stuff. But on the day-to-day basis, Spanish is the local language that people use to communicate. And I venture to say that maybe 45% of the population is bilingual. Even though the education department here gets $5 billion a year in aid from the U.S. government, it's kind of ridiculous that the population is not 100% bilingual. You find Costa Ricans are more bilingual than Puerto Ricans, which is kind of interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
And so the PPD wants to be status quo, send me the money, I'm going to use it however I want to, I'm going to govern myself, and I'm going to keep my culture, I'm going to send my own Miss Universe contestant, I'm going to send my own team to the Olympics. And believe it or not, as bizarre as that sounds, that is a reason that they use in order to continue to be in this status quo. The PNP party says, no, we are discriminated against because we're, second-class citizens. When I've challenged everybody to define what those things are for me, nobody can give me a reasonable, unemotional answer, right? So the people that want to be independent, the PNP party, I say, well, how are you discriminated? Please explain that to a non-Puerto Rican. And they give me all these things, which are all emotional, right? None of them are factual. And so I think because of the interesting dichotomy of the island, again, there's a lot of confusion as to who are we, right? As an island, as a nation, and some people do identify with being Americans, and the PNP party is, they wave both flags with equal enthusiasm, and it's funny. I'm a gringo here, which is kind of ridiculous, right? But I'm a gringo here. I have a U.S. flag on my truck, and people go, oh, they refer to me in my neighborhood as the gringo, and I'm like, what's a gringo? So are you. I remember one time there was this soccer team. Anyway, it's a long story, but the U.S. was playing another country for the World Cup, and the U.S. lost, and this bunch of guys were sort of, being glad that the Americans lost, but they were doing it in a very derogatory manner, and F gringo and this, that, and the other. And I went over there and I said, hey, what part of Colombia are you from? And he said, what are you talking about? I'm Boricua, And I'm like, why do you say that? I'm going, oh, because you were talking crap about the gringos, but I bet you have a U.S. passport, right? And that threw him for a complete loop, right? And I was doing it to prove a point, right? Like, you call me gringo, but so are you. But it's part of the, again, the challenge of living here. I see when people from the mainland come to live here because they have these tax incentive programs, and they come to live here and they struggle for the first 6 months to a year because they come with the belief that, oh, this is just like moving to Kansas. No, it isn't. This is more like moving to Central America than it is to moving to Kansas, right? The infrastructure is different, the culture is different, everything is different. But there's this underlying feeling about the gringo that is coming to the island. There's a whole bunch of people that are very resentful that Americans are buying up a lot of the good Americans, right? That are buying up a lot of the good property in the island. And I'm not emotionally attached to any of this stuff. So even though I've been coming here for 30 years, I've been married to a Puerto Rican for 10 or 12 now, and living here for 5, my rational mind still cannot grasp this, this feeling. And my wife has told me, it's like, the problem is, George, that you are a gypsy, right? You grew up in one, you were born in one place, you grew up in 2 or 3 other places, and you've been traveling the world for 30 years, and you don't have this sense of, patriotism and all of that. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Maybe if I was born and raised here and had the history that the Puerto Ricans have, maybe I would feel that way. But since I don't, I look at all these things in a very practical manner, and a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. My father, taught me that in someone else's house, you don't have an opinion, right? So I say these things to you, and I used to say these things when I first moved here to people that were from here, and I was not a very popular person. So my wife was like, you need to tone that down. My wife is an attorney, and so she has a lot of customers, and she's known in the community, and she's like, look, stop being a gringo, and just, you're not going to change history. I agree with you now that I've met you and we've traveled the world together, but you're not going to change culture. So just accept it. And so I do.
And with that, we're running a little bit long, but sure. I wanted to get in our third question and give you a chance to talk a little bit about your business, because your business doesn't really have anything to do directly with Puerto Rico. But you are a pioneer in the ATM industry and crossing over with cryptocurrency, which is also something very avant-garde. Please share with the audience what you project will be the further developments in those industries.
Sure. So the whole concept of, so the first Bitcoin was created in 2009, and then by 2013, this ATM showed up that will allow a person to buy Bitcoin through an ATM, using cash. And so our company started way back then being the pioneer in driving these ATMs and allowing people to buy crypto through ATM. So today we are a software company, so we run this platform where different deployers connect their ATMs to my platform and allows them to sell crypto. So the platform does compliance, and it does all the liquidity, what we call the inventory of the crypto that you have for sale. So it does everything you need to have this business. The deployers do the last mile, which is like they buy the machine and they install at retailers and deal with the retailer. So that's what we do. That's what we've been doing. Lately, we've been pivoting a little bit and being more of a what I call a financial center, right? So we still sell crypto. That's what pays our rent. But we are also selling other products and services to that same machine, right? We're selling, all kinds of financial services, whether it be, bill pay, debit, credit card top-ups, doing currency conversions in some markets. We also started selling gold notes, right? Something called a gold back, which is an actual piece of it's the size of a currency of a $20 bill, but it's made of 100% gold, 99.9% gold, right? And so it's being sold online, but we started dispensing that through ATM. So we are integrating all of that into one device, and that's where we see our future. We're still going to be in crypto, it's a big part of our business, but we are also pivoting to offering these other products and services to our customers, and that's we're going to see that across many different stores in the United States. And by the way, we were the pioneers in Puerto Rico in installing those kinds of machines, and we still have a leadership position here. So.
Fantastic. Well, George Fernandez, it's been great having you as a guest. As you know, we became instant friends when we connected a few weeks ago. How can our audience get more information about you and your company and your endeavors?
Sure. So we have two main websites. The crypto is bitstop.co, bitstop altogether .co, not without the M. And then the other one is the Gold ATM machine, and that website is goldatm.com, right? Same company, just two different products, goldatm.com.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. An important minimum wage case for federal contracts. The states of Nebraska, Indiana, Idaho, South Carolina, and Arizona sued the Secretary of Labor, President Biden, and others in the government. The suit was filed to challenge Executive Order 14026, directing federal agencies to include a clause in federal contracts requiring contractors to pay employees a minimum wage of $15 an hour, and ordered the Department of Labor to implement such a rule. The trial court ruled against the states. They appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The states argued on appeal that the executive order and DOL implementing rule violated the Federal Property and Administrative Services Act, FPASA, and the major questions doctrine, and that the DOL implementing rule violated the all-important Administrative Procedures Act, or APA. First, the appeals panel held that the minimum wage mandate exceeds the authority granted to the president and the DOL in the FPASA because the law does not authorize the president to impose a wage mandate. The president cannot issue an executive order instructing agencies to carry out the minimum wage mandate by posting to any of the operative provisions of the law. The court held the same was true for the Department of Labor. Second, the panel held that the major questions doctrine does not apply because the executive's reliance on the FPASA for the minimum wage mandate is not a transformative expansion of its authority. Third, the panel held that the Department of Labor's implementing rule was subject to the arbitrary and capricious review under the APA, and the DOL acted arbitrarily and capriciously when it failed to consider alternatives to the $15 per hour minimum wage mandate. Even the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which often sides with Washington, did not agree that Biden's executive order was okay.
Objection, Your Honor.
The FCC is investigating Disney and ABC over DEI practices. This was announced by Brendan Carr, chair of the Federal Communications Commission, that the entertainment giant is promoting invidious forms of DEI discrimination, referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. From Carr's letter to Disney CEO Robert Iger, Carr stated that the FCC's Enforcement Bureau will review whether Disney or ABC have violated any FCC equal employment opportunity regulations. He added that the probe will apply to both past and current policies. Numerous reports indicate that Disney leadership went all in on invidious forms of DEI discrimination a few years ago, and apparently did so in a manner that infected many aspects of your company's decisions.
Please raise your right hand.
The solar company, which received $3 billion from the Biden loans, warns it might go bankrupt. According to a report by the Washington Free Beacon, Sonova Energy received the largest federal loan to a solar company in history. My question, why is any government money loaned or given to any company that is not directly connected with advancing the military interests of the USA? Note that I favor solar and alternative energy sources, but it has to be done based on the markets, not the insane decisions of an out-of-control Dem whack jobs. Where was the GOP when this nonsense happened? Where was the slopstream media? This is reminiscent of Solyndra, a solar company that ended up going bankrupt after getting over $500 million in our tax dollars from the Obama losers.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
In a bit of good news, the FBI announced that it has in custody a top MS-13 gang leader. Joe Vargas Escobar, also known as Momia, within the gang, was arrested by agents in New York. He was brought before a federal magistrate and ordered to remain in custody and is then being transferred to Nevada. He is charged with racketeering and is associated with at least 11 murders. He reportedly ran the gang's Nevada and California operation. Note that he was in New York when arrested. So he ran to a state where he thought he could game the system. Well, the Trump administration has finally caught up with him after this ludicrous threat to public safety under the Biden-Harris administration.
Silence in the court.
I came across a fascinating article from the Wall Street Journal titled "Why Florida's Condo Owners Are So Desperate to Sell." That caught my eye since Florida seems to be the place everyone wants to live these days. The article indicates that insurance increases, special assessments, and limited financing options have jacked up costs beyond reasonable market conditions. Older units are taking a bigger hit. The article noted that some 30 years or older condos are down 22% over the last 2 years. Again, a bit of a surprise.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.